In the heart of Chandni Chowk, where the air itself seemed carved out of noise, dust, and restless footsteps, something strange happened one burning afternoon. It happened so quietly that most people didn't notice it, yet it started with a force powerful enough to shake even the sternest hearts. It began with a pair of police dogs standing frozen in the middle of the chaotic street, their sharp eyes locked, not on danger, not on criminals, not even on the screaming crowds, but on a little girl kneeling on the pavement, her fingers trembling as they traced a drawing no one else cared about. And in that impossible moment of stillness, in that vortex of confusion and sound, something inside those dogs shifted. Something ancient, something instinctive, something unexpectedly soft. If you believe in kindness, second chances, or the quiet bravery hidden inside ordinary people, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe before the story unfolds further. It truly helps bring more such heartfelt stories to life. The girl's name was Sana, barely 10 years old, with hair always tied in a messy knot and eyes carrying the bruised sort of innocence found only in children used to being overlooked. She lived just a few lanes away from the main bazaar, in a tiny rented room that could barely fit a bed, a bucket, and a chipped wooden stool. Her father spent his days repairing cycle tires on the roadside, while her mother stitched clothes for long hours to keep the landlord away from their door. They were poor, yes, but poverty was only part of Sana's story. What weighed on her small shoulders far more heavily was loneliness, the kind that lingered in the corners of her heart no matter how much she smiled. Every day after school, she wandered through Chandni Chowk with a piece of chalk tucked in her pocket. Chalk was cheap, fragile, and often broke before she reached the pavement she loved to draw on, but she didn't mind. Drawing was her escape, her language, her way of filling cracks in her life with strokes of imagination. The street was always crowded, vendors yelling prices, rickshaws squeezing through impossible gaps, tourists clicking pictures only to lose their way seconds later. But Sana always found a quiet patch of pavement near the old police outpost, where the dogs usually lay tethered in the shade. These dogs, Raka and Sharu, were legends in the area. Fierce, disciplined, trained to catch thieves without hesitation. Most people feared them, children avoided them entirely. Their heavy paws and cold noses were constant reminders that they were not pets but working creatures forged for obedience and vigilance. Sana had never dared go too close. She always kept her distance, drawing silently while they rested. But that day was different. The sun was unforgiving, baking the tar roads and stirring tempers. Vendors argued, shoppers pushed past each other, and the air was thick with impatience. Sana crouched on the pavement like she always did, her chalk scraping lightly. She didn't draw flowers or cartoons or houses the way other children did. She drew faces, faces full of quiet sorrow, faces with stories carved into them. Today she was drawing a dog, not Raka, not Sheru, just a dog she imagined, gentle-eyed, tired, longing for affection. It was the kind of dog she wished she could hug without fear. The chalk trembled in her hand. She hadn't eaten lunch. Her stomach hurt, but she ignored it. Her world lived in lines and curves, and she followed them faithfully as though every drawing she made held pieces of her own soul. From the other side of the street, Raka and Sheru watched her. This wasn't the first time. They had noticed her before, the little girl who sat close but never close enough, the girl who never smelled of fear or danger, the girl whose sadness rested on her small shoulders like a silent companion. Dogs sense things humans commonly missed. They noticed how she always glanced at them with curiosity but lowered her eyes. Quickly. They saw how she clutched her chalk tightly like it was her only treasure. They saw how she smiled when her drawings finally came alive on the pavement. But that day, her drawing was different. It was full of longing. Something about it pulled the dogs toward her. Sana did not notice they were watching. She was lost in her work, shading the ears, blending lines with her fingers, tracing shapes again and again, as if imprinting them upon her heart. It wasn't until the world around her suddenly quieted, just for a second, that she sensed something was different. People had paused mid-step, a vendor had stopped shouting, even a cycle rickshaw screeched to a halt. Only then did she lift her head. Raka and Sheru were walking toward her, slowly, silently, without a command. For most people in Chandni Chowk, this would have been a terrifying sight. two trained police dogs approaching a small girl while the officers shouted behind them to stop. But Sana's breath caught not because she feared them, but because she felt seen, truly seen. For the first time in a long time. Her fingers froze. The chalk dropped and rolled across the pavement. Raka stopped right before her drawing. Sheru lowered his head and sniffed it. The two fierce dogs that usually barked at strangers now sat down, almost protectively, forming a silent circle around her artwork and around her. The officers reached them seconds later, confused, scolding, tugging at the leashes. But Raka and Sheru refused to move. Their bodies were heavy with intention. Their eyes were gentle in a way no one had seen before. Sana's heart pounded. She didn't dare touch them. She only watched, mesmerized, as the dogs seemed to guard her drawing like it was something precious. The officers exchanged looks. Something impossible was unfolding. The crowd murmured. Some found it cute, others strange, and a few clicked pictures. But for Sana, it was magic. It was the universe folding inward to give her a moment of belonging. From that day onwards, everything changed. Sana no longer drew in fear or hesitation. She drew with the comfort of being protected, watched over, and the dogs, as if following a sacred ritual, always came to sit beside her. They didn't bark, they didn't growl, they didn't scare away passers-by. Instead, they observed her drawings with an almost philosophical stillness, occasionally tilting their heads as if trying to understand every line. The officers, too, began to soften. They started to bring her water, sometimes a packet of biscuits. They never said much, but their silence held appreciation. They could tell she was special. Her drawings carried emotions that reached even trained animals. Word spread quickly. Vendors called her Choti Kalakar, little artist. Tourists bent down to watch her create magic on the pavement. Her drawings became her voice, and slowly she began to feel less invisible. But life has a cruel way of testing those who dream quietly. One evening, when dark clouds gathered and a storm threatened to swallow the bazaar whole, Sana's father collapsed near his cycle repair stall. Exhaustion, dehydration, untreated illness, it all struck at once. He was rushed to a clinic, and the bills were far more than the family could afford. Her mother cried silently all night. Sana sat beside them, terrified yet determined. She wanted to help. She needed to help. The next morning, while the rain washed the streets clean, she made a decision that would change her destiny. She took her chalks, whatever pieces she had left, and went back to her pavement. Not to escape reality this time, but to face it. She drew with a kind of intensity she had never known before. She drew her father, her mother, the tiny room they lived in. She drew their struggles, their love, their resilience. Her hands moved like they were guided by something divine. People gathered around her, struck silent by the raw emotion her drawing carried. A local shopkeeper, known for helping those in need, was moved to tears. He asked her gently what was wrong. Sana hesitated, then whispered the truth. Her father was sick, and they couldn't afford treatment. What happened next restored faith in humanity. Within minutes, the vendors pooled money. A few tourists donated too. The officers from the outpost collected contributions from nearby stalls. Even strangers stepped forward. By the end of the hour, Sana had enough money to take care of her father's medical bills for weeks, and standing right beside her during the entire moment were Raka and Sheru, their bodies pressed close as though shielding her from despair itself. It wasn't just kindness. It wasn't just charity. It was community rising together, because a little girl had spent months giving them something priceless. Emotion, honesty, beauty, and the gentle reminder that every person carries a world inside. Her father recovered slowly. Her mother cried when she heard how the community had helped. And Sana, she realized something extraordinary. Her art wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever paused to feel something,